Unless you're just dripping in cash, chances are that you're going to need to raise private money to fund fix and flips or Brrrr deals if you're trying to build a rental portfolio. The problem is a lot of real estate investors are doing this wrong and quite ultimately playing with fire and even potential jail time. In today's video, I'm joined by Drew Wiard, who has successfully raised multiple seven figures worth of private money to grow his real estate investing business. He's done it in a way that's ethical and quite frankly, very conservative, where he shouldn't run into any legal problems. It's also super easy. Every real estate investor, including you, should be doing it. There's a right way and a wrong way to do this.
So a lot of what we see, I think, from some of our peers is, every new investor probably starts out with not a whole lot of money, and they want to begin raising money from either their peers or people they know, or maybe even people that they don't know. The challenge with that, though, is that the SEC regulates investments in the United States, right? Whether they're big investments, small investments, even the smallest little loan from a new acquaintance that you make is technically regulated by the SEC. And so you have to be very, very cautious because you don't want to get on the SEC's naughty list.
Yeah, I mean, just because you've seen somebody else do it doesn't mean that it's okay, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think we'll call out like the big one that we see, which is like, hey, if you have cash sitting around and you'd like to make a 12% return or greater on it, slide into my DMs.
Yeah, super risky. There's a lot of gray areas to what's appropriate and what's not, but just coming straight out and saying, I pay X amount of return, please invest with me, super, super risky.
I mean, I think the SEC is kind of like the IRS, in my opinion, in that I never want anyone in their office to physically ever utter my name, right? Like,
Yep.
I'm going to fly under the radar. I'm going to abide by the rules. And ideally, I'm going to accomplish what I want to accomplish in my business. So you and I have both been able to raise a pretty substantial amount of private money. And we haven't had to do it through like the, hey, if you have money sitting, reach out to me. Or I know guys that'll actually mail letters to people that have issued private mortgages being like, hey, I see you are a trust deed or private mortgage lender. Let me borrow your money. You and I aren't doing it that way. And I feel like we're doing it in a way where we're kind of more abiding by the guidelines. The problem, in my opinion, with kind of how the SEC writes a lot of this stuff is it's still kind of gray. Like, they don't tell you this is the playbook for raising private money where you won't get in trouble. They do dictate some things, though, like the first time you meet or interact with somebody, it should not be a pitch to invest with you. So Drew, I'd kind of been doing this, but for my other companies, of building an email list and sending content out to it, really without the goal of raising private money. It just kind of came naturally where people were like, hey, can I invest with you? And it's once you kind of build up that credibility, it's interesting. I've literally had people be like, hey, I just inherited $1 million and I don't know what to do with it. Can you use it? And just kind of like, well, hey, my name's Ryan. Like, we should probably get to know each other first, but you've got a really good way of doing this, which is building a newsletter that you kind of initially start circulating in your network. So why don't you talk us through that and kind of show us a couple examples?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been running a newsletter that I send out to people for probably the last 24 months. And it really came from starting out trying to find private money and doing it wrong, right? I was that guy kind of making some of those posts or asking for it in ways that would throw red flags. And so I've had good peers and good people come to me and hold me accountable and say, maybe you should consider going a different path. And so as I've thought about it, the real goal should be to develop a relationship, and a relationship that you can document and show, hey, these are some of the foundational steps that I've taken to get to know this person and their ability to invest and whether they're savvy or not. And so I've for me, that took me down the path of doing the newsletter, because the idea is the more I can show them what I'm doing as far as rehabbing, analyzing deals, the kind of properties I like, don't like, it will engender people to want to reach out to you and say, hey, how can I do what you're doing? How can I come alongside you? And I think, Ryan, you'd probably agree with me. Most of the private money that's come our way, at least in the last year or so, really comes naturally. They're reaching out to us instead of us reaching out to them.
Yo, absolutely. Yeah, no, I've never sent I need private money for this deal that closes on Monday email. It's funny. It's normally to something totally unrelated. And then the other thing I've seen is it's typically the people that lurk on the email lists. Like they don't typically reply back to me or engage with me. And then randomly they'll just reach out and be like, hey, do you take on partners or do you take on debt or equity financing, kind of a thing?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'll kind of show you what I've put together that has helped put me out there just to increase my own personal brand awareness and get people to understand who and what I do. So what you see here is this is my landing page, right? And what a landing page is, I use a program or a web tool called MailChimp. There's lots of different programs out there that you can use, but it's basically just a simple web page that I can put out on social media. I can send people via email. If someone sends me a DM and says, hey, what are you about? I'm interested in talking to you. This is one of the first things I shoot to them is a link to this so that they can get into our network. And it basically, I do a lot of flying. So here's a picture of me flying my paramotor, little bit of, logos, but it's just a simple welcome message that says whether you're here looking for deals for yourself, if you want to collaborate, you just want to talk about real estate.
Notice not I pay 9% if you put yourself on this magic list.
Yeah, never. None of that, right? This is just, let's get to know each other, right? You want to follow along, let's chat. This is the digital way to do that. So we start a relationship out that way. They just give me their email address and their name. And then whether I send a monthly email list or, I've got a new project that we just finished up, I'll send it out that way. And some people will say, well, I just do everything on social. Well, not everyone's out on social, right? There are a lot of people, some people who have a lot of money to lend who don't waste time on social media. The
other problem I would throw out there is depending on what social media app you're using, they're going to pick who your post reaches. So you might have 1,000 followers and Facebook isn't going to show that to all 1,000. They may choose to show it to 100. Whereas if you have your own email list, as long as you're not doing anything spammy or scammy, you can pretty well guarantee if you send them an email, they're going to get it. Not to mention, I think that even feels a little bit more intimate than just like you put something on Facebook like everybody else does. No, you personally sent them an update on your business and where you're at.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And what's different about the email format, is you'd be shocked how many people email you back and you really do start a dialogue kind of one-on-one, which can really lay the foundation to start that relationship. A single email back and forth probably isn't enough to start talking about private money, but it's enough to say, hey, let's go get coffee sometime, or why don't you come to the next real estate investor meeting and we can meet in person.
Well, I think it's also because it's private, people are comfortable being like, hey, Drew, I'll have people hit me up through Instagram that are like, hey, I have $200,000 saved. Is that enough money to try flipping houses? That guy is never in a million years going to comment on my Facebook post like, yo, bro, I got 200 G's. Is that enough? But they're comfortable doing that where it's a private forum, which I think is important.
Yep, absolutely.
So I do just want to point out for people looking at this, your landing page is not super sexy. Like, couple lines of text, a form and a button, and looks like you're running this on MailChimp. So, anybody looking at this who's like, oh, I'm not a designer, neither am I, and neither is Drew. So you don't get to use that as an excuse not to do this.
Right. Yeah, I'm not a digital marketer by trade. I practice medicine, and this is still easy enough for me to crank out on the side. So once folks will opt in, then I do about a monthly newsletter. I don't call it monthly because I don't want to be held accountable to falling behind if I miss one. But I send this out and I see a lot of newsletters from different folks. Sometimes they're very word heavy in today's era, people don't have time or the tolerance to sit and read tons of stuff. So I'll usually start out with just a quick picture that's interesting, a little summary of what the last month has looked at, what's been on my mind. And then we go back to pictures about what are we working on, you know, what sort of podcasts I've been on. And yeah, it looks familiar, doesn't it? You know, here's a recent project that we've been working on. This was the first Airbnb that we've ever done up at the lake. Here's a couple of snapshots of the pictures that my company, Clear Sky Properties, has acquired lately. And some of the work that we do out in Phoenix. We do apartment syndications in Phoenix. And so we touch on some of that. And then I host the local RIA. So here's a picture from the last time we were setting up for that. And that's about it. You know, there's nothing in here that says, hey, if you want to invest with me, call me, or anything. I'm just telling my story. And it's astounding how many people reach out and say, hey, I'd like to know more about what you do.
Well, and I like that you use pictures as much as you do, because it does convey a lot more of who you are than just kind of a wall of text can. The other thing that I like with your approach is it's very like, you start out kind of personal development-y in this particular newsletter. You then go into projects, then kind of some recent wins, and then you're kind of just updating people on all aspects of your life, where anybody who's interested in Drew, this is stuff they're gonna wanna see. Pardon this interruption. A couple people have told us down in the comments that I talk too much with my hands, but if you're enjoying this video, please like as well as subscribe. We're putting a ton of effort into this channel and would love your help in helping it take off. Back to where we were. One thing we didn't touch on, you know, previously you showed your landing page. This is what they get once they're on it. How do you get people onto your landing page?
Sure. One of the most common ways when I'm building the newsletter and it's going to come out in 2 or 3 days, I will typically post a link to my landing page out on social, and I'll say, newsletter is about to drop in the next day or two. If you or someone you know would be interested in this, jump in and subscribe. And it's another 100 every time I do that.
Cool.
So
the other thing you could do if you're watching this and maybe you don't have a huge, you know, social media following, you could always run ads to your market of, I'm a local real estate investor, documenting the process as I'm going through it. If you'd like to follow along, you can do so here. So if you're looking to grow your list, which, I mean, that's primarily how I've built my list, has all been off of cold traffic. That's another way you can potentially pull people in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hear a lot of people say, well, Drew, this is easy for you because you're slinging deals on the regular, right? Well, even if you're starting out, take pictures of yourself analyzing deals. Take a picture, you know, of the kind of properties when you're driving for dollars or whatever your method is, you know, snap a selfie next time you go to your, yeah. I mean, any of that stuff, it just shows people what you're doing. And if they're curious, they'll start asking you about it. You don't have to have all this stuff going to have an interesting story.
You got one more for us you want to show us?
Yeah, I can show you, you know, again, just another example of some of our newsletters. They're pretty similar format. Again, me flying because I fly paramotors every chance that I get. Well, there's us hanging out in Florida and the whole crew when we came down to visit. And again, a couple more properties we closed. Not a lot of text, just talking about the next RIA meeting because I host the local RIA here in Fort Wayne. I was on a podcast, so I threw that in. A little more Phoenix stuff that we do, and you know, a little more flying pictures with the kiddos, and then we're out. So cool. Try to keep it pretty simple.
So I'm going to throw this out just because it's how I've done it, and I'm going to be transparent for the sake of this video. I've been a little bit more aggressive than Drew in that I will mention we had a private lender on this deal that made a 9% return, you know, on an APR, but I'm not putting any call to actions on those of like, do you have money you would like to earn a return on? Drew's a little bit more conservative and will do it more like, you know, me and my partners on this deal, or we did really well on this. But the important thing to keep in mind, almost every time I've been hit up by somebody interested in investing with me, it hasn't been after I've asked for it. It's been after I've given an update or provided value in kind of some way, shape, or form.
Right. Absolutely. And I think the real takeaway is the idea of reaching out via open solicitation versus people you have relationships with. If you're just throwing it out on social media, that's to anyone, and that's very risky. The goal should be to meet people, grow your network. Once you know them, you can have conversations about, this is what I do, and these are the type of people that I'd like to work with. If you're one of those, then let's have a conversation. But that's after you're well established.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would actually say that this is probably one of the largest opportunities for established and budding real estate investors that they're totally missing. You don't just build an email list because you want to be a coach or you have a product or a course or something to sell. You can build it to build and establish relationships. And I'm kind of the mindset, hey, you do it all on Facebook. Well, Facebook isn't always necessarily going to be here. Email's been around a lot longer. I know several guys that are people that are big on TikTok, that when TikTok talked about getting banned, they went into like emotional spirals of like, well, how am I going to get in front of my people? So always owning that data. I've even done a text message newsletter through a tool called Mobile Text Alerts. It's mobile-text-alerts.com, where I'll throw out a post of, hey, I'm putting out this week's newsletter. Here's kind of a hook. Like, I'm going to teach you how we did blank, text this to this keyword to get added to the list. I'd way rather have phone numbers or emails than a like on a Facebook page from somebody who may or may not get to see my content, depending on what the algorithm chooses.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I think the goal is not to be redundant, but to build relationships, right? And relationships will outlast tech as it comes and goes.
What you have any other thoughts on on this? Any neat instances of capital you've raised or anything like that you want to kind of throw in here?
I think starting out, I assumed that when it was time for private money, I would ask, and that person would either say yes or no. I think for me, my biggest wins have come from putting myself out there, and maybe I'll talk to an individual and they'll be in or they'll be out, but it's usually they tell someone who tells someone else, and then Bob tells Sally and Sally tells Stanley, and then Stanley reaches out and says, okay, let's have a conversation. And a lot of times I don't know that individual, and that's an opportunity to get to know them. So the money never comes from the people you expect it to come from.
No, I would say the same thing. In my experience, our best source of new private money lenders is our old private money lenders. Like, you do what you say you're going to do, you pay them when you say you're going to, and you pay them off at the rate you agreed to, and you need to borrow money again. That person's like, well, yeah, it worked great last time. So cool. Anything?
Yeah, absolutely. I would tell you, I've got like 5 private money lenders that I use regularly. If I need more, I'll go find a few more, but I've done exactly what I told them I would do, and they're in for life. You don't need 20 private money lenders. If you can find a couple that you have a great relationship with, you're set.
And, if you wanted to even be more aggressive, if you ran into a position of, I need to get a deal funded, I would rather have a private list of people I could put that in front of than Hail Mary that sucker out on social media. Same thing if you're looking for properties to buy, right? If you get local people in your market on an email list and you need a new flip, you should probably let them know. Versus like being like every other real estate investor on Facebook and being like, I have cash, I can close in 5 days. And if you didn't like the results of the election and you're going to move overseas, like pretending like they came up with that thing we've all seen 5 billion times.
Yep.
You'd way rather be able to shoot that to somebody privately that you've kind of built up a relationship with than just kind of kick it out there into the ether and hope the right person sees it. I also think you can do it on an email and have it not come across desperate. I had somebody recently add me on Instagram that I have no relationship to, that I happened to check out one of their stories, and the guy's Instagram story was like, if I've ever done anything for you, I'm short on rent, here's my Cash App. And it was like, he was a couple $100 short. It was like, dude, you probably would have gotten a lot further if there's a couple people that are close to you, if you'd just been like, hey man, can I borrow $100? Then,
right.
Agreed. Throwing it out there for everybody.
Sure.
Anything else you've got here in closing?
I would just tell folks, just be cautious. If you have to choose, on the spectrum of being cautious or risky, stay on the cautious side. Tell your story, let people come to you, and just build relationships. That's the way to find private money.
Yeah, there's in flying, you and I both fly.
Yeah.
There's a slogan I was taught at the glider port in Torrey Pines, which is there's old pilots and bold pilots. There's not many old, bold pilots. So I would say the same thing with real estate investors. Those that do well are conservative on their ARVs. They properly estimate their repairs. They're not optimistic that they can get things done dirt cheap. In the same way, if you're raising private money, going about it in a way that's more conservative versus putting it out there for anybody and everybody to see, all it takes is one pissed off person to get you in hot water. One person who's upset with the fact that you're winning to get heat on you that you don't want. I'll share this. We actually got called one time by the SEC. My business partner, not me personally. This was before my time, thank God, because that sounds horrible. But they had a financial planner that was upset that his client was pulling out all of his cash and giving it to us. And well, why? Well, a financial planner can't make a commission on what we do. Yeah. So he turned him in to the SEC and said we were basically committing securities fraud. And after tens of thousands of dollars, the SEC said we're not going to pursue this at this time. Note, they didn't say, yeah, you guys are good, keep doing what you're doing. They just said, we're not going to pursue this at this time. And that was without any of the stuff you're seeing today on social media of, I pay 20% APR if you know somebody with money sitting. I imagine that conversation and the result of that investigation could have been a lot different if we were hot and heavy trying to solicit funding from people we don't have established relationships with.
Yep, I would totally agree. And the SEC, it's a complaint-based type of organization. They're going to come once someone complains about you. And right now, while the market's really, really good and most flips are going okay and rentals are doing fine, probably not too many complaints. If we see a big market slide and you've got someone's money and they're upset about it, then they're going to go and they'll start looking back through the Facebook page and through the emails and all that kind of stuff, and they'll dig it up. So
and you better believe they check that stuff.
You bet you they do. Absolutely.
There was a scammer recently that I'll throw his name out just because for B-roll it'll be hilarious to throw some of his stuff up on screen. But there was a guy on Instagram who went by like Hush Puppy was I think his handle. Okay. And sure. One of my favorite posts was him sitting on like a Rolls next to a Lambo, like just drenched in like $100,000 worth of designer stuff. And the comment says, "People say I'm too much. Are you even enough?" And the dude's now in jail. He was one of the people that was doing like the wire fraud scams. The guy lived, I think, in Dubai and would send over the title company wiring instructions, and people would wire money into these offshore accounts that were his. But how they actually caught him was his social media. A couple emails he'd used to set up accounts tied back to emails he'd used, and what ultimately did it was his birthday. They were able to crack the password on one of his accounts when he posted a "Today I turned 37" on Instagram, and they went and entered that in as a security question and had him. So you think government officials won't look at that if they're interested? Bro, you're dead wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I work really, really hard to do everything I said that I'm going to do for my private lenders. And we've had really, really good luck. But there is a reality where even if I'm making those payments and everything's going really, really well, they could complain to the SEC that they want their money back, or they may call me and say, "Hey, I've had a change in my life. I lost a job or something like that. I need my money back." Well, we've recorded a mortgage. We've provided a note. Our lawyers have drafted it all up. So it's very official, and they know that this is the course we're on. I may not be able to give them their money back. And if they're upset about that, they could take it to the SEC. And even though I'm following all the rules, SEC starts digging into my history and my past. And so it's super important to keep all of that clean.
No, I think it's kind of like being without blame, right? If you're running for political office, you better not have any skeletons in your closet because that dumb thing you posted when you were 17 years old is going to come back. We actually had a guy who was a business partner that had something like that. There was someone who was 12 years old talking about he was going to beat somebody's ass. And it was like, hey, if I'm not friends with you and I search you on Facebook, this is the first thing that pops up under your name. You need to take this down. So, I think it kind of goes along those lines of, even if you're doing everything right, somebody could still file a complaint and stuff you've done online could come back to bite you. So I would say if you're watching this and you've made some of those missteps, you might want to clean up that digital footprint a little bit. Probably wouldn't hurt you.
Yeah, I've gone through that exercise to say, okay, I've learned something new. I got to start scrolling through the last 24 months and make sure. It's not a fun thing to do, but it's all part of learning and growing and trying to do things the right way.
Drew, so you've got a really cool YouTube channel where people can go watch you fly while you talk about real estate, which I'm a little upset about because I was trying to beat you to the punch, but you got it up there. So you're the first flying real estate investor. Is it just the flying investor?
We're getting ready to launch. I've got a couple of clips where I'm just playing with editing and fun things to look at. But if you search my name, Drew Wiard, Wired is wizard without the Z, you should find me. We're starting editing we've got all the raw footage. We're starting editing this next week and logos and intros and all that kind of stuff. So in the weeks to come, we'll have plenty there. But in the meanwhile, folks can probably find me on Instagram at The Flying Investor. Of course, on Facebook, just with my name.
Perfect. Yeah, and we'll link to all of your social profiles and everything down below. So if anybody wants to find you, they can. I seriously appreciate you hopping on and being willing to do this. I'd built an email list, but not in the way you had with kind of a local following to kind of pull those local relationships. So I really appreciate you hopping on and going through this. This is one of those things that easily could have been a course that somebody would have had to have paid thousands of dollars for. So appreciate you just kind of giving it to us for free.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been impactful for me. So if it can help other folks, I'm happy to help.
Cool. You need anything else, Michael? You think that's good? Sweet. Yeah, that's good, dude. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries, man. This is fun stuff to do.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this video about how to build your own email list and kind of your own local private network of folks that are interested in your real estate investing business. Be sure to like and subscribe if you found this helpful. This is easily something that could have been packaged and sold as a course, but to be blunt, we're more interested in seeing you succeed. Talk to you guys next time.